Good morning. Yes, hopefully you do know who I am. I did used to teach once upon a time. And I used to spend quite a lot of time teaching teachers how to teach a variety of levels, but probably more importantly, trying to get people to self-actualise, I guess, around learning and teaching. You know, thinking about what learning is and thinking about what teaching is, and trying to get them to build a mental picture of what that might be and what the implications are for whoever it is that they were teaching and whatever subject it was that they were teaching. So I've got a whole heap of stuff here. I'm not going to go through all of these slides unless you really want me to. And I've got
give us a copy at the end.
Sorry. And I've got a couple of exercises as well, and I have got some giveaways. All right, electronic, of course, and I make those available for you as well. All right, who knows who Edward Tufte is? Okay, all right. So I could send you all now. You could go off to the library or go onto the internet. You know, spend half an hour doing that. Come back. We could have a conversation about who Edward Tufte is and why he's important. Yeah, and that would be an hour and a half's lesson, right? Yeah, arguably. Edward Tufte is a kind of communicator, and he looks at all kinds of stuff. He's very interested in visual communication. This is his website. But one of the things he did was, after does everybody remember the Challenger disaster? Yeah? When the thing went up into space. Can you remember what happened?
In terms of what went wrong?
Yeah. There was a bit there.
It was a tire, wasn't it?
The gasket.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and it went off and the shuttle went into space, and then there's all that conversation about no, the gasket was the other one, wasn't it? That was the one that yeah. Was this Enterprise? Sorry, Columbia. Sorry, there you go. So it's up in space, and they're trying to decide whether or not to bring the thing back down, and then you can remember what happened. Yeah, the tiles were missing, the heat reflective tiles off the bottom were missing, and as it came back into re-entry, it burnt through, and you know that was that. And what Tufte did, he kind of explored some of the communications that were associated with that, and he was particularly interested in this idea of PowerPoint. All right, so I'll just zoom into that again a little bit more. It's a bit confusing, right? Indicates potential for large TPS damage, thermal protection or something, contingent on multiple tile loss, thermal analysis showing no violation of certain criteria, safe return indicated even with significant tile damage. Yeah, and what he goes on to argue is that, you know, using things like PowerPoint, particularly the way in which it's often comes up on our screens and it's all bulleted, right, gives a hierarchy to things. Yeah. Arguably, the most important stuff is at the top, and the least important stuff is at the bottom. And actually, in this case, he went on to show, that the stuff at the bottom was the stuff they really should have paid attention to, and yet they were, looking at some things that kind of took them in a different direction. So just the mere act of presenting stuff on PowerPoint had this very significant effect on the recipients of the information, and then the decisions that they went on to make. All right. So that's just interesting about PowerPoint. Right? But just from that one thing, you could go off and explore all kinds of ideas and opportunities, I guess, in your learning and teaching. Or get your students to do that. Right? Come back and talk about it. Yeah. So that's often the kind of thing that I would do, I guess, when I was teaching undergraduates. Whilst this is amusing and it gets people's attention, there's actually some quite serious stuff that you could link to it. Like I say, he does a lot of work in kind of communications. How do people communicate? How do people prefer to be communicated with or receive information? Yeah, all kinds of stuff like that. So let's not do a PowerPoint. All right, let's do something else. What's in the box?
Well, I couldn't see the picture.
Yeah, no, you can't.
No.
Nothing.
The way you're holding it, it has a little bit of weight.
Yeah, it's got something in it. That's all right. Yeah, yeah. Can't get in it. Oh, here we go.
Oh, okay. I needed a new one. Except you rarely use them now.
Okay, it's called. That's right. You rarely use them. All right. All right. Okay, so. All right. So what do you see?
Looks like something from Doctor Who.
I see a dancing lady.
You see a dancing lady? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I thought it was an angel.
Angel. Okay. Anybody else?
A missing bottle.
Missing bottle. Yeah, very good. Anything else? Describe it to me.
Shiny,
Shiny. Okay. Okay. Some features of it are shiny.
smiling,
Okay. It's smiling. Okay. So would we say it's playful? Perhaps. Anything else? Symbolically, what do you see?
International Women's Day popped in my head. But
Oh, well, there you go. Okay. Yeah. All right. Good. Anybody else? See anything symbolic or otherwise, or just figurative?
Well, it's you know, the representation of feminine in what we think of as a dress.
Yes. Yeah. How do we feel about that?
Well, not too happy.
Okay. Well, all right.
Look at
Tell
us
me.
all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ladies.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there are exceptions.
exceptions prove the rule.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, what do you think the designer was trying to do when they designed this?
Well, it could go either of two ways.
Go on.
One could be the traditional feminine serving everybody and looking after everyone and
Yeah.
providing the drinks.
Mhm.
Or it could be that, well, in Australia, beer is boys,
Ah,
wine
right.
is
Okay.
girls.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Okay.
Could it be simply, I mean, it's just a whimsical representation of a standard design.
It's a whimsical representation of a standard design. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So, yeah. Yeah. Arguably, that's exactly what it is, right? So, what do you think the designer was trying to do? Be whimsical.
In a marketing sense, it's
Yeah.
creating an opportunity to sell a product which is kind of ubiquitous.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, okay, and it sold many products, right? It's by a company called Alessi, who many of you would have heard
You
of.
could argue that opening a bottle is actually a male's job, and so I'm going against the traditional role of that by going to allow a woman to do that. There's a woman.
Allowing listen to this language. I mean, right now, go on.
Why does it have to be messy? Like it's a bottle.
It's a bottle. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
He was just trying to.
It's a key.
No.
All right.
He was trying to make it something.
You can't open a beer with the top of it. You should be
You
able
can't. That's
The
right.
mouse should be able to
Just wanted to differentiate himself from everything else in the
Yeah, it's a
in the
distinctive
market. That's-
Yeah, it's distinctive in that. Does anybody know what kind of style or style of design this represents?
I don't know.
I'm going to assume you're the expert on that.
Reminds me someone who was Picasso, like sort of.
Yeah,
drawings.
but this kind of playful, over exuberance, putting stuff in that doesn't need to be there. It's not functional. Well, it is functional. Yeah, some would argue, but it isn't purely functional. It's decorative as well.
Definitely not Northern European, is it?
All right, and Alessi,
They don't do play.
Italian. All right.
They can stand, I
Yes.
think.
The designer was who was the designer? I can't remember these days who the designer was. So is it modern or
Not classic.
Well, what do you class it? What's modern?
exactly
Yeah.
right? Yeah, what's modern? Okay, so in the subject that I taught,
Yeah.
okay, modern would be things like the Bauhaus and stuff like that. Postmodern, right, would be this kind of thing. All right, because it has humour, it's whimsical, it has arguably bits and pieces that it doesn't need in order to function. Yeah, and to some extent, it's what people like or they don't like. All right, what did you say? It's just a bottle opener, right? Yeah. So, from this one product, we would get into a discussion about manufacturing, about styles and movements, about symbolic attachment or functional attachment that people have. I'm a bit more functional, right? Yeah. You know, those people, you know, does anybody have a Mont Blanc pen? Right? Yeah. You know, it's not something that I'm, you know, I know that's, for some people, they're interested in that kind of thing. Yeah, style, right? Other people, I just like a pen that works, right? And I'm very particular about pens that work, all right? So there's all that kind of stuff. There's quite a famous book called Watches Tell More Than Time. Yeah. You know, what kind of watch do you wear? Yeah. What does that say about you? Yeah. What does it say about your personal brand? Yeah. What does it, you know, what does it say about what you want to say to the rest of the world, so on and so forth, right? So, again, just a very simple technique for getting into some quite detailed discussion, and if you want to, into some instruction as well, all right? Critical discourse, that's all it is. Yeah, and you can do this in any subject. What do you see? What characterises it? Yeah, it's playful. Yeah, it's whimsical. It's, to some people, perhaps confrontational. Interpretation, what does it mean? Yeah, and quite simply evaluation, what value do we attach to it, if any? Right. And you can do that with all kinds of, arguably, I think, all kinds of different disciplines. Not necessarily if you want to get right into the detail of things, but certainly if you want to get conversation going, yeah, in your classrooms. All right, let's do a little exercise. So I'm going to talk about what's wrong with that. What's wrong with that slide? No. Today we are going to talk about, all right, some of these things. We probably won't talk about all of this stuff. We'll see where we go. All right, but let's start off with an exercise. I want you to do this on your own to begin with. All right, just 5 minutes or less. Oh, anybody seen this? Yeah, everybody's seen that, right? All right. I want you to think back to a personal experience of learning. Could have been at school, in a sports, in a hobby, anything that was particularly awful. All right? That you didn't engage with, that you didn't learn something in. Jot down a few notes as to why it was so bad. All right, how was that for you? I'm going to give you something else to do in a minute, but how was that? Just give me a bit of feedback about. Yeah, was that interesting? All right. What were you able to share? Common experiences? Yeah, starting to see some themes. Yeah, themes emerging. All right. Okay. What was I doing while you were doing that?
Roving around.
Yeah. Why?
Just people were engaged and.
Yep. So make sure they're on task.
Yeah.
Yeah. Making sure that the conversation has gone as far as it's going to go, and then kind of.
You realised quickly we were off task.
Trying to pick a moment when to stop the conversation, right? And say, right, we'll do something else. All right. So for this piece, you are going to need again something, or one of you is going to need something to jot down, because now I'm going to put you into larger groups of 4. You can stay in your 3. Okay. So now groups of 4. Of course, what's this? This is a well-known technique. What's it called?
Buzz groups?
Buzz group. Yeah, some people call them buzz groups or think, pair, share. Right. So you do something individually, then in a pair, and then you share it, or a pyramid exercise. Yeah. So you've been looking at something from your own personal experience and sharing that with each other. Thank you. What I want you to do now, it says 15 minutes, we'll probably do it quicker than this. But you can see how this could easily consume an hour. All right? Yeah, depending on what the nature of it is that you were trying to do. You don't want to overwork techniques like this, because students will get bored with them very quickly. All right? But just that simple technique of getting people to talk to each other is incredibly important.
Can be extremely difficult, particularly near the beginning of the year.
Yes.
You're talking first year students
Yeah.
at the beginning of the year, and get into pairs and then get into a bigger group.
Yeah.
A lot of them are very, very reluctant.
Yes, indeed. So if you can find the right trigger kind of material, right? Hopefully based on some experience that they have, common experience there, right? You can start getting them talking.
Sorry, similarly, what we often get with, I'll say business students, is there's a certain business student character who wants to know, so what's the answer that we're looking for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're saying, so there's a discussion.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we'll get onto that later. All right, so somebody's going to report back to the whole class, right, later. Thinking about both, this is what the student said. I used to run this with a panel of students. I get students to talk about their experiences, and then I get staff to talk about their experiences, right? So I've just lifted this from an old slide, forgive me. From your pooled experiences of good, and that's a really interesting thing to do, actually. Yeah, at some point in the year, right, you might get a panel of your students together and say, tell us about your experiences. Anyway, can you see any themes arising? Things which tend to characterise good and bad learning in general. All right? So write down under 2 columns, things that lead to unsatisfactory learning and things that lead to satisfactory learning. Yeah, generalised. If you can generalise them into some kind of concept, that'd be great. All right, off you go. Okay. We'll go with whatever you've got. So again, you use your judgment as to how long you want this thing to go on for. What kind of format do you think you can run this in terms of numbers of students, type of room, that kind of thing?
Oh, I run a lecture thesis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, as many as you feel comfortable with,
20,
right?
200.
So long as you're comfortable with that level of noise, a lot of educators are not, right? Because they're used to being up here, right? So again, while you were doing this, what was I doing? Just roaming around, right?
It's a bit more difficult lecture theatre, especially one.
It's a little bit more. Yeah, I used to frustrate the occupational health and safety guy at Nottingham Trent University in one of the lecture theatres, which conveniently had it was all tiered, but it conveniently had the first one just far enough so you could step onto the desk, and then you could walk up the desks all the way up to the end. I think the students liked it, but they hated that.
A noisy classroom's a good classroom.
A noisy classroom is a good classroom. That's right. I mean, I trained as a primary school teacher, and one of the first things they tell, some of you would have done the AVID training as well, or been exposed to some of that. And often one of the first things you get into is the notion of space management, how important that is. Simple things like that. If you're standing up at the front and you're not moving from the front, you tend to do what they say, talk to the T. It tends to be the people in the middle and the first few rows there. Right? So just keeping that, in the back of your mind to make sure that you're communicating with everybody in the room, or ensuring that people in the room are communicating.
Yeah. And, again, primary school trained, and I say to my students, don't do what I'm doing standing down the front. I have to stand down the front because the computer's there and I need to show you something. Go and mix it up and go and sit amongst the students.
And that reminds me,
move around.
I always try and carry one of these. If I am using, a presentation, I always try and have one of these. Yeah. Well, this thing connects to
your laptop.
my laptop. Yeah. All right. So the task I sent you, asked you to do, was you've been talking about these very personal experiences, reflecting. All right. I'll say more about that later. Reflecting on these personal experiences, and then trying to, from those, through your conversations with each other, generalise some of the things that lead to satisfactory and unsatisfactory learning. So, I'm going to go round and I'm going to get you to, give me a little bit of background on what you've written there, what you've put down, and we'll see if we can fill up a reasonable list. Who's talking for this group?
I took the notes. Was it listening around talking to?
Oh, give me something off your list.
Your summary or an example?
The summary, the concept, or
Okay. So the negative ones, what we found was the common theme of lack of effective communication, often humiliation use.
Okay, right. So, so often humiliate. Help me.
IATIO.
Thank you. So humiliating. I can't reach too far. So negative. Okay. Humiliating. All right. Was that a common theme that you, in your own personal experiences? Yeah. Right. Okay.
So someone's experience was humiliation by poor design,
Okay.
and then there were other examples where humiliation was used as a way of either illustrating to others that's the wrong way to do it, or just to say, well, that's what you learn. You're only going to learn by being humiliated.
Because we all know that works, right? Either this, positive or negative, I don't mind.
We talk about a few things, but we were saying sometimes the pace is inappropriate, either too slow or too fast for the learners.
Yep.
We also, sorry.
So that can be obviously on either side, I would think. When we talk about pace, we often talk about something else as well. It's not just pace, it's also...
Well, we talked about with the pace, we talked about the lack of acknowledgement of where the learners were.
Right, yeah.
And so, in some ways, the pace was set by perhaps the lowest common denominator when we didn't know.
Yeah.
There was no recognition of prior learning.
Sometimes referred to as pitch, right? So, is it pitched at the right? Is it pitched at the right level?
Yes.
And you're quite right, often is at that lowest common denominator. And yet we know that having clear and consistent and high expectations of students is one of the things that leads to better learning outcomes. Now that's not to say, of course, all right, that if somebody's not getting something, you've got to help them get there, one way or another. Okay, and this was a personal experience. This is something that you've.
We did also talk about lack of preparation on both the students' or the teachers' part. That can also hamper the learning. And we also said that if it was boring, then there was no chance that people were going to engage.
All right, I would agree. All right, next group, what have we got?
The negative or positive?
It doesn't matter either. Yeah.
Okay, positive, are we? Okay. One of the big ones that our group talked about was tapping into the students' own curiosity.
Yeah.
For positive.
Yeah. Okay. So if we think about curiosity,
And inquisitive.
what kind of characteristic? That's kind of inquiry, kind of. Yeah, it's a kind of inquiry kind of thing.
So inquiry learning maybe.
So there was a provision, a trigger, so like you used with the thing, or it might have been imagery, it might have been a resource, it might have been...
Absolutely. When I did lecture, although typically they would be an hour, sometimes here they were 2 hours. When I first started, I did what most teachers do, I put loads of text on the, because that was my prop, that helped me, if you like, get through the material I thought I had to get to.
Don't you love it when people stand there and they've got a slide there and they stand there and they look at it and they read off the slide? Hello?
PowerPoint karaoke. Yeah. So nobody's doing that here, right? Nobody. Now, I was fortunate. I taught a subject that lent itself to using a lot of visual imagery, or three-dimensional objects. So certainly in the last part of my undergraduate teaching. And I set myself a challenge, which was to cut my hour down from, the 20 or 30 or whatever slides it was, and I started aiming for 12, which is really 10, because as we all know, tell them what you're going to tell them it, and tell them what you've told them. So the first bit was the introduction, and the last bit was the summary. And then I set myself another challenge, which is simply have 10 pictures, and then we'd, do stuff like this, and we talk about, that. On one occasion when I completely forgot to take anything with me, rushed to the library, got out in those days a video, put it in, and we all watched it together. So what? But what I did was I visibly took notes, whilst we were watching it. So I had a big whiteboard and I was taking my own notes. And then we shared, what have you done? What have I done? How does that compare? What do you think were the most important things? Why? Similar kind of things to what we were doing here. Okay, I've forgotten what we talked about. Inquisitive? Was there something else?
Giving another one.
Oh, okay. We can go for a while if you want. What was another one? On the negative, Tony was talking about in particular little guidance and feedback.
Feedback, yeah.
So that was-
Incredibly
that was a key
important,
one.
yeah. You sometimes hear people say, all the learning is in the feedback.
Yeah, so she did an purely online course and received really no feedback throughout the whole course other than the assessment. So you'd post things on the discussion board, no one would get back to her. Were you going at your experience?
Yes, I was talking about a fully online course I did where there was a resource and then a discussion forum, a resource, a discussion forum, a resource, a discussion forum, and so on. And there was no engagement, no social interaction with the other students, no facilitation or guidance by the teacher, no communication in the forums and feedback in the forums about what the students were posting. So I was, as the e-learning advisor where I was taking notes about everything they were doing wrong, why it was wrong, and how not to do it in the future. But that was my second poor experience of fully online. Another one was I was doing a fully face-to-face course, and then one of the subjects they gave me, I was a guinea pig for them, and they gave me a CD-ROM, this is your login, and that was it. That was my start, and at the end of the year they failed me. They didn't check if I had managed to log in, they didn't check nothing. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, let's try and fill up some positive stuff from anybody now on the positive. Oh, we've not got to you, have we yet? Yeah, go on.
Fun. It should be fun.
Fun, okay. Should it always be fun?
No, that's what we discussed.
Yeah, we don't know.
No.
Not feel up anyway, yeah. Okay,
Have fun. Varying activities. So,
Okay. Yeah.
changing the pace once in a while.
Yeah, kind of back to.
Making it, well, along with engaging, participatory. So people participate in something, not just listen.
Yeah.
Respectful interaction.
Yeah, mutual respect.
Yeah, mutual respect.
Respect. Yeah.
So in that participation, we got a strong opportunity for practice.
Yeah.
Mm.
Practice. Okay.
On the negative side, we actually said a poor learning and teaching environment. You can have the best teacher and the best materials, but if you walk into a crap environment, it really changes things. And we commented on
That's right.
having to teach
So
the same classes the same week to different cohorts in different places. And we gave the example of Werribee campus here, that people have complained about. And I had a similar situation in Canada. When I taught in the main marketing unit in the main campus, it was great.
Yeah.
And I'd go to this satellite campus, and there was one room, there was nothing there apart from this room. It was a public theatre.
Yeah.
And the students would just sit there and, it was just, it was actually a pain to get through.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because those kind of implicit factors, that impact quite significantly, hygiene factors, arguably, that impact quite significantly on what goes on in your classroom and your own personal ecology and your own personal psychology, right? So could I find a car parking space this morning? Right? Did I come to work pissed off? Yeah. What effect is that going to have?
Well, that's
all that kind of stuff.
We also discussed the fact that teaching is acting.
Yeah.
And you get out of that car and you put your teacher hat on, and nobody would know that you had a crap morning and
it's an interesting. So I used to run. I mean, some of what you're seeing here is from a session that I used to run, which was called Teaching as Performance.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now there's a dark side of that as well, which is what?
Burnout.
Hey? Narcissism. That's right. Yeah. I've got an audience. Yeah. And.
It's not necessarily accountable, but it's an inevitable trap that a lot of people
You do fall in, and I feel it myself. You know what I mean? You're kind of, you're almost a frustrated actor, right?
And the SETs come in, and you're even more narcissistic. They love me.
So
I'm going to change my tie because that's the only quality you get. Oh, Max's ties are crap.
and yet there's no correlation between student satisfaction scores and learning gain.
Yeah,
that's an interesting thing, right? So you get up there, you make people laugh, and you think, this is great, I love this, right? Who's it about, right?
As isolation, so the narcissist, if they're fully narcissistic, don't even get the laughs because they're not engaging with the audience or participating. So if they're like that, then the students are isolated, they're just standing out there talking and not even noticing if they're falling asleep or drilling on the table.
Okay.
I think that's the problem with the idea of teaching as acting or teaching as performance.
Yeah.
Because it tends to imply that there is a script to be delivered without engagement or interaction.
I absolutely disagree. Absolutely disagree, because performing, have you ever been, I don't know if anybody's ever been, to a performance where it's interaction with the audience?
Yeah, like watching Dimble with that stage show where they have the audience as part of the show.
And that's the way that I take it. We are all participating in that,
Yeah.
and we don't know the script, and we're going to wing it, even though you know what it is that you want
I
to
think it was a risk. I didn't say
Yeah.
everybody did.
All right.
Oh,
Okay.
right, no.
All right.
So I didn't acting squad.
We've also got improv, which is a very
You've got what?
improv.
Oh,
Yes.
improvise. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, sometimes, yeah, I think that is important. You know, sometimes we're so locked into trying to get through the content, yeah, that we forget that we can go off in, you know, some different directions, come back to that, which I want to do now. All right. So let's think about some of these big concepts then. Anything else that I've missed that somebody's got?
Explore? Yeah.
Exploration.
Exploration practice.
Yeah. All right. And so many of you would have heard of experiential learning. Yeah, you know, Kolb's experiential learning cycle and all that kind of stuff, you know.
So we have one which actually we thought that could be fitting in either sort of two columns,
Yeah, go on.
which is the challenging. So
Challenge.
people
Yeah, could be too challenging.
can thrive on challenges, and some they're just being put off by challenges.
Yeah. All right.
And the learning teaching environment could be both well as well. The new rooms we've got here are great for learning
We
teaching.
say
the old ones
challenge
too.
both sides.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I was listening to you talk about what the students bring. Was that right? Is that a fair paraphrase? Tell me what you were talking about.
What do you mean, the coaching example?
I don't know what it was. You were saying like, you know, you come with something, right? You know.
Well, I swim in the morning, and what gets me is there's a coach that trains this group of swimmers, and I see the coach as the teacher, and I see the swimmers as the students, and the coach is not in the pool. The swimmers are in the pool. And all the coach says is, you know, when they're swimming along, they sort of come to the end, then he goes, oh, and then off they go again, faster or slower. And I'm thinking, that's just marvellous. Here I am, plodding along in my lane, and they've got this coach, right? And the coach makes the students do stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think it's just a magnificent example.
Right.
But I just want to add another space to that, because we're talking about, you know, positives. Carl Wieman says you learn through failure.
Mm-hmm.
So you do an example and I couldn't work it out, and you say, well, why didn't I? You know, that I think is sort of an ingredient to that. You know,
that's right.
that sort of
It's
oppose.
like stuff about, you know, what's the opposite of success,
Yeah.
right?
And it's
Anyway, and it's
sorry.
not failure.
Yeah.
Well, it's not trying.
It's
You know, all
it's
that
not,
kind of-
no, not failure. It's
all that kind
whatever
of-
the wording is. But yeah, so the coaching thing about engagement.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see if we can.
Oh, I came in quite late, so I just thought of something that might be relevant to human nature. Well, quite the opposite. I think students like to be acknowledged in terms of achievements.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
if they do well,
Yeah.
if they perform well, they like to be acknowledged in terms of their achievements and efforts.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. And how important is that? And that acknowledgement can obviously come very much in terms of what they're learning, but it can also come in terms of just declaring something about yourself. You know, you're part of the group. You know, tell them something they don't know about you. You know, whatever it happens to be. Yeah. You know, I saw Bon Scott in AC/DC, you know, on the tour that he died on, for example, right, in the UK. He came through the crowd at Leicester Motford Hall with Angus on his shoulders. It was great. Anyway, I nearly got conscripted into the Cypriot army. That's a different story. All right. So there's all kinds of things. You know, just be personal. You know, and we know that's what we're trying to do. All right. What I'm going to try and do now is break out of this personal stuff and get it into a bit of. I'm going to try and teach you a bit of theory now. All right. So, if I draw a couple of boxes on this board here. And I say, I'll call these learner characteristics. Characteristics. I'll call these teacher characteristics. Sorry about the writing. All right. What are some of the big things that our students come with?
Prior knowledge.
Prior knowledge. Okay, yeah, excellent. What else? Why are they here?
Interested in the subject.
All right. Yeah, why do they come to university in the first place?
They want to go somewhere.
They might want to go somewhere. All right, yeah, so somebody said, what did you say?
Aspiration.
That could be an aspirational thing, yeah. Could be, something else. So in other words, what is it that,
That's basically
yeah, right, social, absolutely. There's a whole bunch of reasons why students come to university, right? It might be an academic thing, it might be a social thing, right? It might be a work thing. They want to get somewhere as a consequence of doing those things.
They have a purpose.
Yeah. Do you think those things?
Expectations sometimes.
Yeah. So
Pressure.
yeah, that's
Just to
right.
make
That's
sure
right.
it's environment.
So do you think those things are constant, or do they move around a bit? Yeah, they move around. Yeah. Okay. So how might we describe that?
Meaning?
Motivation, perhaps,
Ambition.
or intention. Yeah.
Some are here for the outcome,
Yes.
the ticket at the
Many,
end.
yeah.
Others are here for the journey.
All right. So what kinds of motivation are there? If you think about that, one is extrinsic and one is intrinsic. Yeah. Absolutely different forms of motivation, right? Are you intrinsically motivated? Are you extrinsically motivated? Are you motivated in the same way every day with the same things? Okay. What have these students been doing for the last, if they come straight from school, what have they been doing for the last 15 years? Learning, all right. And what do you think that's taught them beyond subject matter?
Habits.
Habits? Yeah, okay. All right.
Social skills.
It's rewarded them in a certain way,
Yeah.
all right? So it's provided, starting for them, they start to build in their heads some idea of what, conception of,
Expectations.
So they come with, expectations. We have this idea of a concept, they have a concept or a conception of learning.
And of identity.
Yeah.
Conception of identity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And we often talk about, or I do anyway, talk about sense of belonging as being incredibly important, right? Whether that's to the group, to the subject, to the discipline, to the profession, whatever it is. So here's a few things that they come with. What about teachers? What do they come with? What do you come with? Knowledge. Prior knowledge, obviously, yeah. You've got the same kinds of things, right? Yeah.
Lack of knowledge.
As well.
So you've got your own prior knowledge or subject, matter expertise, or whatever it is.
Communication
The more you
skills.
know, the more you realise you know.
You've got your own conception. Do you think you have conceptions of what learning is or what teaching is?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to, right?
It's like being a parent in a way. So you end up parenting the way you were parented by your
There
parents.
you go.
You end up teaching
Yeah.
the way you were taught by.
Well, a lot of people do, right? Because it's one of the few. If you think about it, it's the only teaching profession where you're not a professional. You're not professionally qualified, all right, to teach. Yeah, you might be very good at knowing what you know, and therefore, it's like all teaching and learning relies on making assumptions about what's good, what's bad, what's efficacious, what isn't. Yeah, what works, what doesn't. Yeah, we make those assumptions.
You use your experiences.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and hopefully you improve as you go on. Yeah, or you engage with often you might talk to somebody about it, or you might see somebody. Yeah, often modelling is
But
quite.
those
a way.
experiences can be either positive or negative, so they can have an either sort of effect as well on what to expect from the students.
One of the most common complaints I've heard over the years from colleagues is these students aren't like me when I was their age.
It's not as beautiful.
As hard as I did, these students don't read the way I did. So rather than putting themselves in a student's position, they always reflect on when I was a student, it's like this.
We had to
I
listen,
never do
we
that.
had to pay respect.
I'm so thrilled they turned up sober.
All right. So if we've broadly, you know, I'm just thrilled when I turn up sober. So if we've got these characteristics here, these, you know, what's mediating between the two? Well, they're looking at us, we're looking at them. Yeah, it's perception, right? You know, that's the only thing that can mediate our perception of them, their perception of us, right? So you've got this kind of reciprocity here that's going backwards and forwards.
If you have in mind, or the concept of teach the teacher,
Yep.
you're going to have more backwards and forwards.
Yep. Yeah, true. All right, so as a consequence of those things, what do you think is going to happen?
Big happy families.
That's what you hope, right? Okay, so here you've got, we've got those characteristics. In here we might call, what should we call this? We'll call this, so, yeah, what students do, should we say? Something like that? Because
perception versus reality.
Because
Expectation versus reality.
as you've already pointed out, so a lot of this is contextually based, right? How your students react, if you like, is arguably largely contextually based. The environment they find themselves in, the climate that you create in your the exercises that you have, whether or not they found parking this morning, all of those things, conspire together, all right, to have an effect. All right, so when we think about what students do, we sometimes call that something. Does anybody know what that is? When you give them a task, right, they approach it, all right, in a certain way. All right. What do you think those different approaches might be?
Engaged, disengaged.
Engaged, disengaged, instrumental, meaningful, yeah? Often that kind of thing. All right. So we'll call that an approach or an intention to study. All right? Something like that. All right, what's the outcome?
Depending on how much conditioning they've had in the prior years before coming to university, the first question is usually, is this assessed?
Very good.
Yes.
Now, all right. So, absolutely. And we've all those people, and we probably did that ourselves, right? Is this going to be assessed? Is it going to be the exam? Right? Do I get marks for this? Yeah, all that kind of stuff, right? So what kind of outcomes then do you think there are? Broadly, what kind of outcomes are there? From any of this, this thrust now is come left to right, do you get this? Yeah? So there's this kind of interaction going on. This means that students do something, and as a consequence, there are some outcomes.
Well, they will learn, regardless of what happens, they will learn something.
They will learn something, all right. So there's a qualitative outcome. Yeah? Yeah? So the quality of the learning that they've achieved.
Mastering a new skill.
Yeah? Could be a mastery thing, all right.
You could be learning that universities offer that.
Yeah. Anyway, so there's a qualitative outcome. What other kinds of outcomes are there? What's the opposite of qualitative? Quantitative, right? Okay. You've been talking a lot, and you were talking earlier, about quantitative, that says. You were talking earlier about how you felt. Right at the start, we were talking about how you felt. All right. So how would I describe that? It's definitely qualitative, but it's an emotional, yeah, or an affective, what we call affective often, yeah, the affect. All right. And one of the great things that you were talking about earlier was this notion of how important feedback is. All right. And feedback is incredibly important, all right? Because based on these outcomes, what do you think happens?
Their opinion of the teacher.
Well, they've achieved these outcomes. Yeah, what's that? What do they say to themselves about those outcomes? Oh, that works. Yeah, all right, yeah. So they start to build up, beliefs here about success and failure. What works? What doesn't work?
There also needs to be a line above,
Yeah.
because we learn, as we teach, we're learning about teaching and learning.
So here's an example. Well, I memorised that, right? Yeah. And I regurgitated it in the exam, and I got top marks. Yeah. Am I going to do that again? Yeah, damn right I am. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, but there's also another feedback loop. All right. Down here. So what have we learnt about ourselves as teachers as a consequence of these outcomes? I use the same example. I set a multiple choice exam. I gave the students lots of content, all right, and they all succeeded. They did very well. All right, what have I learnt about that? That works, right? Yeah. Well, they've got good SATs, whatever what it is. So similarly, then we build up our own beliefs about. Again, success and failure, or efficacy. All right. So this is incredibly powerful, right? Now, this is just the map is not the territory, right? It's just a model, all right. And does this look like anything? We've got any engineers in the room? Say it again. It's a feedback. Yeah, it's a closed feedback system. All right. So if anybody knows about homeostasis, you would know about homeostasis. All right. Does that look like a homeostatic system? Yeah. Okay. And what does homeostasis mean? Simply.
Keeping your internal environment constant whilst the external environment's changing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Or in equilibrium, some kind of equilibrium, right? So when this kind of stuff works, I've got a better shot of this. Once this starts, it doesn't take many iterations, all right? So if you think about this, the thrust of this is left to right, all right? And it's iterative. So you've only got to go through a few cycles of this before these things start to build up and these things start to build up. And they could be false positives, if you like.
Well, I think they're already there when they get here, because at school they've been doing the test. So I find when I teach first years, my first job is to break that down.
Exactly so. Yeah, exactly so. And this is a model that's been with me now for the 26 years that I've been in higher education. All right, it's actually called something. It's called the 3P model, or the Presage Process Product model. Yeah, or input, process, output, basically. All right, here's your inputs, here's your processes, and here's your outputs. And it was developed by somebody called John Biggs. You may have heard of John Biggs, a pretty famous writer and researcher on student motivation. And we've got all that thing going on, right? So here's your student factors, the motivation, orientation to learning, right? So why are they here? Yeah, are they here to get the job? Are they here to do the social? Are they here to, or a combination of those things? Their conception of what learning is it about gaining facts and knowledge and regurgitation, or is it about something else? And can that change? Yeah. Prior knowledge, obviously they bring. And as you can see, there's the same kind of thing on the teacher side. And as I said, the thing that's kind of mediating between the two is this idea of perception. All right, so teaching factors. The motivation that you have yourself, the climate, the ethos, that's created, the conceptions of learning that you have, right? That's going to, remember I was saying about we make assumptions about what learning is? Conceptions of what teaching is, curriculum, all that kind of stuff. That means that students will approach their tasks in certain ways. We will approach teaching in certain ways. Yeah, might be transmissive, we might be more inclusive, whatever. You can have these slides afterwards, they have the whole presentation, but it's in Keynote. Organisation and the outcomes, as we've pointed out, are quantitative, qualitative and effective. This is incredibly important. All right, I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. And institutional, interesting, because outcomes are also institutional. Yeah, we get measured in all kinds of ways. All right, by a whole number of different stakeholders, professional bodies you'll be particularly familiar with, who seem to want to get very interested in this stuff here, all right, when they should be only interested in this stuff here. Don't get me started on that one. Anyway, so that's that kind of closed-loop feedback system, and I've drawn some boxes around here to say, well, that might be what's going on in your classroom, but your classroom sits in an institution, and your institution sits within a state, and a state sits within, all kinds of other external, contextual, political, however you want to describe them, economic constraints, or whatever. So I present that to you, all right? You don't have to believe it's just a model. All right? As I said, the map is not the territory. But it's been helping me understand what goes on in my classroom for 26 years. I actually like it, all right? It just helps me think about who I am, what I do, why my students do what they do. Yeah, get the idea? Okay. Should we carry on a little bit more? Can you manage a bit? We don't do another 45 minutes, do we? All right. Do you want to do a bit more? Yes. All right. Many of you would have heard when I say, I asked you about approaches to teaching. I said some, could be quite instrumental, and some could be quite meaningful. So we often think about learning as being broadly split into a taxonomy, all right, that ranges from a closed conception of learning, all right, and an instrumental concept of learning, which is allied to a closed conception of teaching. Yeah, it's about the content, delivering all the content. Or we talk about a meaningful approach to learning, yeah, and an open conception of learning, an open conception of teaching, all right, broadly. And when we think about it, you might have heard about these surface and deep approaches. Yeah? Everybody heard of these or not? You might have heard about it in the broader. Have you seen examples? So, student reduces what's going to be learnt, and here's some quotes, all right, verbatim quotes. It'd have been more interesting if I'd known that I wasn't going to be tested on it afterwards, because in that case, I've thought about what it said instead of all the time trying to think, now I must remember this and I must remember that. Yeah? You maybe did this yourselves in your past. Yeah? I learn law by cases, listing principles. I have a good short-term memory, and I can memorise enough to get through the exams. What's wrong with memory?
It's clearly French.
that's right.
It's an expiration date.
At the university I worked at in the UK, we used to have a joke in the staff, we had a common joke about people who are GPs, and they actually should be made to take PhDs, then they have to think about what they're doing in their job rather than just looking on Google and coming up with the job. Because that's what this is, it's all very memory.
Well, that's right, and memorisation will it'll let you down. It's a strategy, and it might get you through, something, especially if that's what you're being rewarded for. Yeah. All right, but if you have understood something, you will remember it. If you memorise something, chances are you won't. Now, that's not to say that surface learning is not. I'll get onto that in a moment. But clearly, you do need to memorise stuff. If you're doing, something that's in a field that requires, knowledge of a great deal of terminology, you've got to remember that terminology. Yeah, botany. Yeah, names of plants. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, you think about it for your own subject. So, often when people talk about these kind of things, surface approaches, they go, "Oh, surface is bad and deep is good," right? Surface is a thing over here and deep is a thing over here, right? They're not. They're part of the same thing. Right? They're part of the same being. So the student attempts to make sense of what is to be learnt, thinking, seeking integration between components and between tasks, and playing with ideas. And that's why that idea of social constructivism is so important. It's when you go and socialise what it is that you're trying to learn, that you really it becomes part of who you are. Yeah. So we often ask that question: where do you think most learning takes place? In the classroom? Outside the classroom? Yeah. I try to look for, the principal ideas. I try to think about what it's all about. I thought about how he built up the whole thing. I don't like having to take notes in lectures. I prefer to concentrate on understanding. I like to be able to listen so I can understand what the problem is. Yeah, does that sound familiar to you? That was certainly me when I did my undergraduate degree. I did mine quite late. I was about 30 or so. Yeah, but that was it, A lot of students have their heads down writing notes. I'd sit and listen, because that's how I wanted to engage with that, with that material. Okay. I'll let you read that yourself. So this is actually where all of this kind of stuff comes from. It's a research technique called phenomenography. All right, and it's asking students what they're doing when they're doing something. Yeah, what are you trying to achieve? Okay, so what kind of approach do you think that is?
What
Yeah. Of those two that I've described earlier, deep and surface, it's deeper, isn't it? Yeah. More meaningful. In fact, meaning behind it. You mustn't regurgitate because that's not the idea of exercise. What about this one? Get enough facts so you can write something relevant in the exam. You've got enough information so you can write an essay on it. What I normally do is learn certain headings. I write a question down, about 4 or 5 different headings, which in an exam I can go introduction, I'll look for the next heading. I know what I've got to write about without really thinking about it. I know the facts about it, I go to the next heading and regurgitate. All right? Regurgitate, yeah. And how many of that, have you seen that in the past? It's almost as if, your own words are coming back on the paper.
But that is what I think a lot of students have learned is expected of them.
Yeah. Well, this is what I'm saying. What students will learn is what you expect of them. Yeah? So back to this, back to this other one. You mustn't regurgitate what David is saying because that's not the idea. All right. And this one. I know the facts about it, I go to the next heading and regurgitate. Do you see any connection here? It's the same student. It's the same student.
In a different context.
All right, doing a double degree. All right, so it's the same student talking about two different experiences. Yeah. So you remember what I was saying? This deep and surface is not separate things. Yeah, the part and a lot of what we do in terms of teaching, if you want to follow this kind of philosophy, is about encouraging deeper approaches and discouraging surface approaches.
But it also tells us a lot about successful students.
Because they are.
They can actually anticipate what's expected of them and adapt to that.
So in the literature, there was when we talk about deep and surface, there also, some people talked about strategic. Yeah? All right? Yeah?
Also mean that I'm interested in geography but not in computing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the strategic intention was this idea that study is a game and the object of the game is to win. All right, so you do whatever it takes to win. And that's what students will do. So is it going to be in the exam? All those clues and cues that you give out, explicitly but largely implicitly, can have a huge impact, on what students do. Or indeed can have a massive impact on what goes on in the next classroom. Oh, you don't need to know about what Alan's talking. This is more, and immediately you've sabotaged that part of
I was going to say, I've just had a couple of kids go through VCE. Two very different kids. One that was basically following the formula to get a really good mark, and basically got that good mark. And so her comment to her brother when she was helping him with something is, "They're not interested in your opinion." And he said, "But I've got something to say." And she said, "They're not interested in your opinion, you need to follow this formula." And I thought, how awful that we've got to a point that he felt. And now, and it's interesting what you were saying before, because I've got one, she's just going to go and she wants to get a degree and finish. That was it. He wants to go to university and enjoy it.
Look,
but he didn't feel like he could do that during VCE because there is a formula.
So what are we saying here? As an individual, we can have this tremendous impact in our own classrooms. As an organisation, a first-year college, let's call it, right? We can have a very significant impact if we're conscious of some of this stuff and we can think about how we apply it more systematically across the experience of our students. So that's that idea about having consistency. You've heard me say this before. What John Biggs calls entrapping students in a web of consistency. Yeah?
And I think that's what's important about first year college is knowing that students are coming from. We have to know our cohort too. Now, depending on what school they've come from, they will also come with a different set of values in terms of how they approach their learning.
Yeah. So that comes down to a whole number of things. That comes down to you talking to each other. That comes down to leadership. It comes down to a whole range of stuff. The way in which we articulate. Even through our, remember that phrase, the curriculum is a mind-altering device, by Elliot Eisner, right? Big hero of mine, right? Comes down to how we even articulate the way what we say and what we do.
Just a question, I'm just thinking about what you were saying. And I know in the course that I'm teaching, we have one of the criteria that's on the assessment matrix is what is your opinion on whatever it is. And the students panic. Like, no, if you think it's crap and you don't agree with it, write it.
That's
And
right.
you're only doing it because curriculum tells you to. And if that's your opinion, write it. And they really struggle with that. So if we're breaking down those sorts of barriers,
Yep.
my question, and I'm not saying that it happens or it doesn't, I don't know, then further on in their degree, are they then going to get squashed back in the box to say, you're going to regurgitate because that is a lot of what is expected of them. It just
Possibly, and you know, but you know, look, this is a kind of Marxist call to action, isn't it? Right? You know, it's kind of saying, you know, come on, right? You know, yeah, you want to make a difference. You know, as I said before, if I do nothing else other than getting educators to talk to other educators about education, right, in the lifetime that I've been in higher education, I will die a happy man. That's what it's about. So here you go. Here's a few takeaways. Right, deeper approach is encouraged by assessment that foster long-term engagement with the tasks, stimulating teaching, all the stuff you've talked about, clearly stated expectations, choice, giving qualitative feedback, high-impact educational practices. You can look at that yourself. There's quite a lot of information on what's called high-impact educational practices. Surface approach, assessment that recalls trivial knowledge or memory, teaching assessment that provokes anxiety, that came up on the list, didn't it? Cynical, conflicting messages about rewards, yeah? So that's about consistency. Oh no, you don't want to do that, you want to do this. Excessive materials, yeah, high workload, right? Excessive workload is one of the real drivers of because that's when you do the strategic thing. Yeah, how do I cope with this? I've taught in engineering for 8 years, and what we started to realise was that, what?
Sorry, I'm thinking about a particular thing I'm dealing with at the moment. It's exactly what you're saying.
Right. So I taught in engineering for 8 years, and I studied 600 engineers as they went through their degrees for longitudinal study, and I profiled them for these approaches. And overwhelmingly, they had a strategic approach to study. Why? What is it about engineering that would force a strategic approach? Huge workload, right? And the half-life of engineering knowledge is about 4 years, so by the time they graduated, half of the stuff was out of date, blah, 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 blah. And they were getting all this content, which actually wasn't serving them very well, because most of it was out of date by the time they'd finished. Yeah? So that's when we moved to inquiry and problem-based learning in engineering. That was the first wave of that in the UK. Lack of independence, poor feedback, all of these things, right, drive these kinds of behaviours. And there's that thing I was saying about this broad difference between a transforming approach and a reproducing approach. Here, the intention is to understand the material. And we've all had that moment, that aha moment, where everything changes. Haven't we? Yeah. You will have, because you've all been very successful learners yourselves, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Whereas broadly, here the intention is simply to reproduce part of the content.
Teaching business units in China and Malaysia. Designing an assessment task which was essay-based, where students would go from surface to deep, by asking them to apply the theory in a unique context that they were familiar with. So, give an example when you've done something that was motivational leadership. Australian students tended to cope with that. Chinese students really wanted to know what the right example was, because their history was all about reproduction.
So again, it proves the concept, right? If that's what you've been exposed to, if that's what you've learned, that what learning is and what teaching is, that is what you will do.
And the Malaysian students coped because their teachers in Malaysia give them examples.
I think this surface and deep, you obviously need a mixture of both.
Of course, and that's what I said earlier, right?
Yeah. For example, if you just have these laws that you need to learn before you can actually go on.
Absolutely.
Before you can take the first step.
Absolutely.
You need this, surface. I have to memorise. Oh no, I've forgotten it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that, all those phrases. There's no thrill without the drill. You know, well, you heard that one, all right? You know, but remember what I said earlier. Often when you go to one of these seminars or something like this, you know, you'll have somebody like me standing up and goes, "There's a deep surface and a deep is bad, and surface is bad, and deep is good," right? You know, and they fail, all right, to point out that they, as I said earlier, they're part of the same thing. They're part of the same being. They're part of the same concepts that people have in their heads and their hearts. All right. So you're absolutely right. Yeah. And sometimes surface is absolutely the thing they need to be because you're going to memorise it. All right. You've sat around for long enough. What I was going to do. These are just some other tips and tricks that I do or used to do. This is a game. You want to play the game? All right. Okay. When was the fax machine invented? When?
Why did you find out?
1890s? Any advance on 1890? No. Earlier than 1890. Okay.
70s.
Earlier.
70s.
1870s?
No.
He said 1890.
1890. Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
19.
Higher?
19.
What was that panel show? Higher, lower? What was that?
1920s.
1920s?
I'm just thinking of
I'm looking at two things here, right? When was it invented and when was it adopted?
After the 18th.
All right. Okay. So the fax machine was invented in 1843 by Alexander Bain, all right, a Scottish clockmaker. Yeah, okay. And what he worked out was that if he got two clocks with mechanical clocks with pendulum, and he connected them electrically, right, he could have raised lettering over on this side that the thing picked up as it crossed, yeah, and it discharged it onto electrically sensitive paper. All right, and as he got them synchronized, right, it would pick it up here, right, and it would discharge it here, right. So the principle, yeah, of the fax machine was developed in 1843. When was it adopted? 70s.
60s or 70s, 70s, I think.
Yeah, 70s. Yeah. He closed 1980s. All right. Why did it take so long? Technology was not there, and importantly, the infrastructure was not there. Absolutely, right? Yeah.
The
Okay.
telegraph was there for it, but people couldn't get the synchronous clocks.
Yeah. Okay. All right. When was the internet invented?
1960s.
Here it is in this box. Anybody seen that?
1950s.
Yeah. No. What was it? Yeah. What was his name?
Oh, it was the English guy.
Yeah.
Washington State.
Yeah. What's his name? Tim
Tim.
Berners-Lee. Yeah. Tim Berners-Lee worked at CERN. All right. And if you actually, you can actually get the paper right where he originally proposed it, and the feedback he's got on it is vague but interesting.
Yeah.
That's the feedback he gets on the paper. Right? So it was, the internet was kind of developed, but that was we're actually talking about two different things. It's the World Wide Web, that Berners-Lee developed. People think they're synonymous, right? The internet is the infrastructure. The World Wide Web is the protocols, right? So it was a U.S. military. Okay, when was it adopted?
1988.
Okay, 80s. All right.
I was using it at uni.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I can remember 1992. Somebody came up and put a computer on my desk, plugged it into the wall, and I went into something called Mosaic.
They were private, you had to pay for access.
Yeah. When I'm going to challenge this, okay, I'm going to say arguably it's ongoing.
Yeah.
All right, it's not ubiquitous yet, is it? All right. We think about this from our privileged, probably first world position, right? But arguably the internet may not be ubiquitous yet. So what about the mouse? And I mean, not the small furry thing, the thing that goes into your computer. When?
There was IBM in the 1950s.
IBM, 1950s. Anybody else? 70s. Oh, all right, okay. So you're saying, all right. It was actually Douglas Engelhart, and you can find his videos on YouTube, all right, where he's talking about a universal pointing device. Yeah? But you're absolutely right. It was adopted. It was Apple in 83. Yeah, was the first, if you like, domestic use of that idea.
Questioning the internet is ongoing. What do you mean by ongoing?
Well, is it everywhere? Adoption.
Yeah, it was adopted, adoption is ongoing, so why isn't the fax machine? Because if you've been talking about other...
Oh, the fax machine's dead.
No, it's not.
We've got one in the college.
Look, whilst I love your focus on the detail,
Yeah.
right, which is great, and shows that you've got it. Shows that you've got it. Yeah, let's move on. Shows that you've got into it. What we're doing here is just demonstrating the technique, right? Okay. Computer, but what is this showing to you? What, you know, if you bought into this, like, what's it saying to you? You're engaged, right? Yeah. The computer.
If I don't has any good code, that kind of thing? Is that
Okay.
Mechanical device that can update.
Babbage, arguably, yeah, with the adding machine, yeah. Yeah, 1840, yeah, about 1840, right? Charles Babbage, yeah. And then through the Jacquard loom, you know, which gave you the punch cards kind of thing. And,
How
yeah.
about Chinese alphabets?
Okay. When do you think? What kind of early adoption of computing was there?
I would agree.
Yeah, it is still ongoing. Yeah, but there were some big standout moves into kind of analog computers. You know, would be in 1945, Macaulay Eckhart, plywood. A nice easy one there for you.
Have to go and make photos right
It'll be after the use of oil, so about 40s, 50s.
Did you see? I just looked at my watch there. Yeah, that I once did that in a class, right? And there was a woman that she took my head off. How dare you? Right, you know. All I was doing was checking the time for what I was doing, and she thought I would I wasn't paying attention because I was looking at my watch. Anyway, but it just shows, right? Yeah, you got to be careful with this stuff.
No, I explain, I just saying, I'm just checking with how people...
Plywood, come on. You know what plywood is, right? Yeah. Come on, give me a date.
I'll say the 40s.
50s, 40s, 1940s.
Yeah, oil became big
Okay.
and they were able to...
Anybody else? Higher, lower?
Much older.
Probably older.
It's much older. How old?
Look, I wouldn't even hazard a guess, but I know it's older.
It's older. All right. So there is evidence, you know, from all of that archaeology of, you know, the Egyptians having laminated, wood together with the grain going in different directions. All right.
Did they use no more oil?
Laminated and plywood, I would suggest, are two different things.
That's true.
Yeah.
Plywood is glued together, laminated is wet.
All right. Okay.
That's not factual.
Well, for your homework, you can go. I'd like you to go each pick one of these, go off and research them, come back and tell me, how they had impacts in political, economic, social, and technical realms. PEST, political, economic, social, technical. Right. All right. So, when was it adopted? Yeah?
I mean,
It's ongoing.
building multi-story.
All right.
multi-story
Let me rephrase it. When do you think it was put into manufacturing, production? You know, when,
50s, 60s, something like that.
yeah, something like that.
After the oil.
Okay. And where? Geographically, where do you think it was?
In North America.
Have to be North America, do you think? Why?
Because they built everything out of plywood there.
Oh, okay.
Scandinavia.
Where have you got a lot of pine trees?
Scandinavia.
So, in 1840, somebody called Nobel.
Yeah, Sweden.
Yeah, all right, yeah. Nobel? Ring any bells? Sorry. All right. Yeah, absolutely, right. So, but not Alfred Nobel. Right? His dad. All right? Emmanuel Nobel. All right? Who developed, took that local resource, developed a way of veneering logs, and then put in blah, blah, blah. So, did you enjoy that game? Yeah? You see what I mean? You could do all kinds of stuff, right, in a game-like way to get people engaged with whatever materials you want. I've played this game with you before. If you came to the Learning Teaching Symposium last year, I've played this game with you. What's on your T-shirt? When you get up you have something on your shirt that you're projecting to your students, right? you know, and I've said, you know, I'm going to show you how much I care, I'm going to make you laugh, make you think, going to rescue you. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. This is from something called Teaching with Emotional Intelligence by Alan Mortiboy. And then you can think about, you know, what impact is that going to have on you, the people that are in front of you. Do you want to play this game? I use this at every opportunity, all right, that I can. And some of you would have done it before, all right? Some of you would have done this before. I want you to imagine a cup and saucer. You can close your eyes if you want to. I want you to get a mental picture of a cup and saucer in your head. And now that you've got that mental picture of a cup and saucer, I want you to pick up a spoon. I want you to stir the contents of the cup. And then I want you to balance the spoon across the top of the cup. All right, everybody got that? Talk to each other about your cups and saucers. What do they look like? What's in them? Off you go. All right. So, when you stirred the cup, was there anything in the cup? Tea. Okay. And when you balanced the spoon, did you balance it that way up or that way up? That way up? That or down? Weirdo. All right. All right. Again, you can let this run for, you know, and I would normally let this run for some time. All right, quickly. What did you cook?
What is a salsa?
Fantastic. All right. Yeah. What's a saucer? That's a brilliant question. It's a very good question. I don't know what a saucer is. I've never used the damn things. Anyway.
Did we?
We'll show you in a minute. Tell me about, you know, quickly, you know, give me some.
Royal Albert, pink floral, gold
Royal
trim.
Okay, yeah. Gold trim, yeah. Anybody else? Yours is black and white? Black and white. All right. Anybody have anything in their cups? Hands up if you did. Keep them up if there was tea. Down if it was coffee. Does that work? Anyway. When you balanced the spoon, did you balance it that way up?
Yes.
Or that way up? All right. Hands up if it was that way up.
Yep.
You're very clever if you do that.
Okay. All right. That way up. Okay. Deep psychological insight there. All right.
One of those things where you put the toilet roll on one way or the other and you get told.
I'm going to tell you about yourselves right now. Okay. All right. So, look, all we're doing here is sparking the imagination. All right. How real was that cup for you? It was there, right? A real picture, right, in your heads, right? You know, you're crazy, right? There's no cup, there's no saucer. It's just in your imagination. So how powerful is the imagination, therefore, and how useful is that as a tool, right? When we talk about some of the things that we spoke about earlier. All right. So anybody have something that looked like this? All right. This is a saucer. Okay. Yeah. All right. I will give you 1 million points if you can tell me what the name of that series is.
Oh no. Royal Albert.
It's Royal Albert. You get some points. Something Roses. You get some more points.
I can't remember.
Rambling Roses?
Oh, yeah, it's so close, right? Yeah. Okay, it's by was it by Dalton or Albert? Can't remember. It's called Old Country Roses. All right, that's the pattern that's called. It was by a Harold Hardcroft was the designer sometime in the 1800s. I think it might have been later. So what? Now, you know, this comes out of one of my design lectures, of course, but we talked about good and bad design. Is it good design?
No, they're hopeless. Because you can't hit your fingers.
It's sold over 100 million pieces. Of course it's a good design.
Yeah, only in England.
All right. Exactly, yeah, all right. So again, leaping from as a springboard right into talking about, in this case, good and bad design. And what are the criteria of good and bad design? Is it aesthetics? Is it, you know, how something's made? Is it how much it sells? Is it
Southern or Northern European?
Yeah. Is it the fact of its ubiquity? Yeah. You know, one of the most ubiquitous, sets of tea sets in the world, right? And on and on. So you can just go on and on and on and on with all of this kind of stuff. Okay. I will finish, and the reason I wanted to particularly show you that one is because it actually comes from a book I had when I was training as a teacher, and it was called Looking, Learning and Making in the Classroom. Thankfully, one of my colleagues, Marina Harvey, some of you may have come across, she did a piece on mentoring here some time ago, very usefully put a resource together, which includes actually that exercise, but a whole heap of other ones around what you can do to promote reflection in your classroom. Okay, so I'll send that out. All right, yeah. All right, so I'll send that out to you. But finally, all right, I'll finish on a couple of quotes, I suppose. Well, no, let's start with so. So what? And this is for Andrew as much as it is anybody else, right? If you're going to have, if you want engaged learners, right, then you've got to promote, discuss, and have discussions about engagement. Right? You've got to infuse the idea of engagement into formal and colloquial discussion. You've got to find ways to generate students' reflection on their study. Legitimise each student within the university learning community. They're just as important as everybody else is. And you're no more important than they are. Take student feedback seriously. Blend engagement measures into routine assessment. Generate interest. Use measures of engagement. Weave measures of engagement into conversations about quality. Yeah, either at the individual level or the institutional level. Transform passive engagement into more interactive learning. Weave engagement into university cycles of evaluation research, that's one for me. Engineer interactions between students and staff on university practice. But if you go back to that idea of classroom, department, college, university, yeah, you can have impact at all of those levels. And one thing you can implement straight away as a reflection activity is something called the minute paper. Anybody use that? Anybody use that in there? And you can do it really every time, all right? Because it's very simple. It takes a minute, all right? And it's in the book. It's in there. You might do that yourself now. Just spend 1 minute, all right, answering those two questions. What was the most significant thing you learned in this session today? And what questions remain in your mind? Just hold that. We don't need to talk about it, all right? You can take that away. But you can use that then. You collect that in at the end, right? You know, and then you've got you've got some pretty good evidence there about, the understanding of the group or what they want to know more about. Or perhaps you might pile all that stuff up, and in a few days' time you might just dedicate, an hour or something just to addressing those, what's sometimes called the muddiest point. Yeah, what was the thing that you didn't understand most? Yeah, you get people to work on that. I think I am done. I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. All right.
Thank you.